Good afternoon. We are here as part of Pensions Awareness Week, and we are in the gorgeous Masonry buildings, thanks to Iconic Offices for this lovely venue. This week has been full of chats about all things pensions, whether it's ethical investing, whether it's consolidating pensions. We have talked of loads of different topics, and today we are here with Brian Mooney, and we are going to be talking about approaching your retirement 5 years out. Brian, you're kind of a very interesting person to talk about this because you have been a guidance counsellor for majority of your professional career in Oatlands College in South Dublin, and you have been guiding the youth of Ireland for nearly 40 years, and you retired 2 years ago. So you were saying, as I've just noticed, you're busier than ever now. You have been working with Standard Life, and you are now an end of career guidance counsellor for the other side of things. So things have kind of come full circle for you effectively. So very interesting take, and you're also a trained therapist as well.
Yes.
Well, and thank you for joining us here today.
That's okay.
I suppose, so from your own experience of retirement, even though it's not exactly as you're saying, you're not sitting at home by any means twiddling your thumbs. And obviously witnessing your friends and your colleagues, what do you think like people need to do to start preparing like 5 years out, whether it's mentally, financially? What are the kind of key kind of variables that people need to start looking at the moment?
Well, the most important aspect of retirement is that you have the resources to be able to live a good quality of life. So ultimately, the financial advice from your financial advisor, the planning way out to make sure that you are in that situation, that's the most crucial. But ultimately, when you have that sorted, and if the financial planning has been done effectively and you will have good quality of income, it's the equivalent of having a really good quality car, fully tanked up with petrol, but you've no plan where you're going. So you're sitting in the driveway. And yes, the petrol's there, that's the financial side, so it's there. So why are you getting out of bed every day? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? And whereas back in the 19th century, when Bismarck originally introduced the old age pension concept, very few people reached it. Most people were long dead beforehand. And those who did reach it lived for a year or two, probably in chronically bad health. I feel like a 30-year-old. I am buzzing. I'm working 18-hour days and loving every second of it. And I'm retired. You know, Joe Biden went into the White House at what, 86, was it 87? Whatever.
He's not that old, is he?
He is, late 80s, you know. So if you look at it, you know, there are people who are doing jobs. I remember having a conversation with Professor Bree McRae when he was finishing up his term as president of DCU.
My alma mater.
And we were talking about retirement. And, you know, he was just finishing his 10-year term as president of DCU, and we were chatting about what we were planning to do. And he said, well, it's not fully fixed yet. Now he's chairing the review of the broadcasting, and he's doing this minor little task of rolling out the entire vaccine program for the whole country. And ensuring that we are all fully vaccinated. And that's retirement. So the concept of retirement...
golf courses no longer factor in.
What does it mean? What does it mean? What it meant for me in 2019 was that I qualified after 43 years in teaching and education. I qualified to get a pension of 50% of my salary and to walk in it onto the horizon, do anything I want with my life. That's what it meant. But for a lot of people, the concept of retirement, it's about degeneration. It's about you're finished. It's about end of stuff. And for some people, that's what it becomes because they don't have that plan. They are the car sitting in the driveway with no idea where to go. And in the interviews that I did with Standard Life clients who had been through some difficult years after retirement, who were quite open in talking to me about this, some of them had serious health issues, cancer issues, breakdown issues. So effectively, having the money in the bank is meaningless unless you begin to see, what am I going to do with my life after I get that financial package at a particular period in time in my life, or I decide that I'm going to walk away from a particular role I've had, as I did, but I then decided I want to continue working with Irish Times in terms of my journalism. I continue to work as editor of Education Matters. I continue to see individuals who came to me for careers advice. I would never turn somebody away. And then Standard Life ring me and say, hey, would you work with us in helping people to prepare for that transition? And I'm loving every second of it.
Okay. But you obviously have your fingers in a lot of pies, and you're lucky because then options open up for you. But let's say somebody who has been in a fairly straightforward career path for their whole life. So they're like, what kind of advice would you give to someone like that who's been doing the same job for 30, 40 years? Okay. And they're suddenly facing maybe what am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, I'm a certified therapist with reality therapy, and William Glasser says that we have 5 needs as human beings. Yeah. He said our primal need is basically survival and sexuality, and that is, the core of the animal within us, right?
A lizard brain.
Yeah. If the bear comes, we run, and we enjoy procreating ourselves. So that's core. But he said beyond that there are 4 other needs which every human being has to some degree, but it's a different balance in every human being, and they are relationships, power, freedom, and fun.
Freedom,
okay. So effectively he says that across those 5 we all chart our lives, and even though we're not consciously aware of it, and most people aren't, we are actually meeting each of those needs in the combination of our marriages, our friendships, our work environment, our social activity, etc., or our activity in the community and voluntary activity or whatever it is. We are effectively meeting those 5 needs.
Okay.
And what I'm saying in terms of what I'm doing with Standard Life is, I'm saying you need to stand back and look at yourself in relation to those 5 needs 5 years out. And you need to say, to what extent am I meeting a very important need that is a power need within me, and I'm the MD or I'm the head of department, and it's very satisfying, and that's part of something I needed to do, and I've had it for the last 20 years and it's great. But when you go out of that and you're at home, and maybe you're with a partner, and that partner has their own way of living within their own space, and you're suddenly there, what's your power need satisfaction? Do you empty the dishwasher or not? Or, you know what I mean? So suddenly you are adrift, and you become stressed, you become anxious, you become disorientated. That messes up your relationship. Your partner basically said to you, will you get the hell out of here, because you're completely destroying my life, because for the last 40 years I've had a different way of living. And suddenly everybody's tearing lumps out of each other. And ultimately it's because we thought about the money, but we didn't think about what we were going to do as human beings. Because at 65 now, my mother-in-law will celebrate her 100th birthday in March.
Wow.
My mum passed a few years ago at 94. The era when people died in their late 60s is, please God, long gone, other than for serious illness or whatever. So if, as I have, got to the stage of 67 where I probably feel about 40, hopefully I will have 25, 30 years of quality life. I don't want to live them thinking I'm just waiting for the day when I pass. I'm still living as actively and as dynamically. But what retirement has brought me is the freedom to choose what I do, when I do it. And that is a really, really powerful thing. But if you don't sit down 5 years out and you don't begin to ask yourself basically the who am I question, and how am I meeting my needs, and how you might begin to realize that you need to replace or re-energize yourself in other areas, so that when you lose those ways of meeting those needs, that there are other things there for you that will meet those needs in an alternate way.
For example, let's say we choose power. Okay. Let's say, as you said, somebody is in a powerful position in work, and they've garnered a lot of respect and so forth, and then suddenly they're at home, and
exactly,
you're like, who's giving you the respect? So what would a person in that position, where would they get power from in retirement? Okay,
so here we go. The last census results was published about a week, 10 days ago, and it now says there are 750,000 people over 65 in Ireland.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And they reckon that number will go to about 1.6 million in about 20 years' time. And all of those people are gradually aging, and they are growing in number, and they, like every other human being, have a wide, diverse range of needs. Now, the tax-paying person from their 20s to their 60s has enough to be doing to be funding the education system, the social welfare system, and the health system to an extent. To suddenly take on all of the responsibility for funding all these people over 65 years of age. A lot of those people are financially independent. They don't need further income. They're more than able to live on whatever income that they have. They have huge skills because they've been managing organizations, they've been in powerful positions. But ultimately, if we don't reorientate our society to begin to develop a range of supports and services and resources that will enable people in their late 60s and 70s to continue to live quality lives, to be able to contribute. So if I'm, as an over 65, doing something for my community that is being supported by somebody else over 65, they're doing something to support me. So we need to build an infrastructure of the skills of people who already have baskets of skills. Now, this is where education may come in. You might, in your job at work, have all the skills you need to do that job. But you might need upskilling in a certain small range of areas to be able to transition that into a very effective role in the community in providing services, which makes you feel empowered again, feeds back into your community, helps people of that age profile that are only growing in number all the time to begin to live quality lives without it all coming back on the taxpayer who's still working to try and fund it.
And in terms of upskilling as such, are you saying, like, is it like technology would probably be one of the big ones, is it?
Absolutely, because I retired from Oaklands in October 2019. And basically I had the freedom to do what I wanted to do. And then we got COVID in February, March 2020. If I hadn't at that stage already taken on my responsibilities with Standard Life and doing what I'm now doing, I would have been sitting at home. Alternatively, because of that, I had to go through the process of the filming that we did to make the advertisement which we have on the Standard Life website. I was constantly doing presentations, so I had to learn all about how to use Zoom, how to do all of these technologies. So effectively, over the last 2 years, I am completely up to speed with all of this stuff that we need to do to be able to communicate in a COVID world, and possibly in a world where we're moving away from constantly having to go to meetings. I also chair 3 boards of management of further education colleges. We had to move all our boards of management to Zoom because I'm doing that as a voluntary activity for my community. I had to, again, learn all the technology, etc. So by virtue of the fact that I was involved and engaged and active in retirement, so to speak, it meant that as the world was changing over the last 2 years in response to COVID, I remained up to speed. If I hadn't been, I'm sitting at home and suddenly I don't know what Zoom is, and etc. And over a period of 3 or 4 years, you then become illiterate. You can still read and write, but in terms of how the world works, you become illiterate. And then you become dependent, and then you become demotivated, and then you become depressed. So ultimately, nobody ever stays in any position, in anything in life. There's no such thing as static. You're either going backwards or you're going forwards. And I believe...
Or sideways.
Well, you can go sideways, but effectively, you're either doing something today that improves the quality of who you are, or by not doing anything, you're going backwards. In a sense, the world is changing around us every minute. Every second. We will go out of this building, and the world out there will be slightly different to the world that we came into this building in. In the certain things will have happened, and the ripple effect, and it's like one of these slow motion cameras that we don't notice it as we live it. But if you took a shot and then put them all together, we see that everything is changing constantly. So what I'm saying as part of this campaign to people 5 years out from retirement is, if you just go home and sit there, you're going backwards from that second. So begin to plan to live fully. Whatever live fully. Now, it might be just voluntary work in your own community. It might be, doing a whole new way of, maybe working, taking on a whole new role. Not because you need to. I mean, if you look at people who, have become multimillionaires, many of them continue into their 60s and 70s working. They don't need any more money. But the dynamic within themselves is satisfied by this continuous activity. So it basically means that until the day when you no longer can work and when you are literally becoming dependent, where you need nursing care and all that sort of stuff, I believe that you should live fully. So to me, the word retirement is simply a date at which you can take a financial package which gives you the freedom to make choices that you mightn't have had up to that date.
Okay. So I guess COVID probably, obviously, has changed everything. But in terms of people who haven't worked for the last year and a half, it's probably, you were saying, you're at home and your spouse or your partner, you're suddenly in each other's faces, and it's kind of no one knows what to do. But in a way, we've all kind of had a micro retirement for the last 18 months.
Correct.
And that's probably made a lot of people rethink: do I want to be sitting at home?
Yes.
Or on the other side, it's actually I love this. I don't want to be going into an office anymore. I don't want to be commuting.
A huge number of people actually really it tested their relationships because effectively people stopped on the spinner where we're only meeting a couple of times during the day, and then you really had to ask some questions, and for a lot of people that was quite painful, and for a lot of people there was a lot of growth in there, and for a lot of people maybe they had to face some realities in their lives and they moved on in different directions, but then they're doing it now, whereas if this hadn't have happened, it might have happened to them 15 or 20 years later, and they would have been far less capable of taking advantage of those things. But the quality of relationships that you can actually develop when you took away all the hectic activity was probably a very positive thing. But at the same time, now that we're all coming back, I think people are coming back with a different attitude, and maybe I think that the children, by the way, I think the children who have had both parents around them for the last 18 months will benefit hugely from not being pulled out of a feckin' cot at 6 o'clock in the morning, thrown into a creche, and that they are actually we'll probably see a huge improvement in the quality of mental health of children.
Not the parents who had to deal with it.
No, but the children themselves who have had. I was with a colleague, one of my colleagues in the Times, in their house, and they've been working from home for 2 years, and their kids are there, and one parent is in the sitting room doing their office online, and the other parent is there with them, and then they just rotate, and the kids have both parents 24/7, and we're going, what's the sociological effect going to be of that down the road? It'd be fascinating to see.
Positive, I would imagine. I've just put my little ones back at school, and I'm delighted for one. But I'm sure it has been
for them it's
carpet pulled out from underneath them.
Absolutely. So. And a lot of people are now saying, okay, we're all going back to work, but I can see the benefits of so we're going to try and preserve through the balance of home working, etc., so that we don't put ourselves and our kids back into that same rat race to the same extent, that we want to keep on some of the quality of some of the insights we've gained over the last 2 years. Excuse me.
In terms of let's say you were saying about people having plans. I mean, the obvious one was when people always did a big trip, or did something really, bought a yacht, or did something like that. What about if you have something like that in mind?
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we did with Standard Life is we have these images of what we want to do, and people have these images. And we use one of them in one of our slide presentations of a group of women on these motorised scooters, etc. And I think that's what I wanted to do. So you go out and you do it, and that's great. And now you've done it.
Yeah.
So you go on the trip and you come home.
Yeah, you've another 30 years to fill.
You've another 30 years to fill, exactly.
Yeah.
So if there is a dream that you have, plan it, do it, but it's one event in the future of your life. It's like, a couple that I know, got married, and they went on the world trip for 12 months.
Yeah.
And they used all the resources they got from their wedding presents to fund this. And then they came home and they had their kids, etc. And they done the world trip, when they were in their 20s or whatever. So, they did Australia, New Zealand, blah, blah, blah. So effectively, yes, if you have something in your head and it really matters to you, absolutely plan it. But it is just a blip.
It's just a blip. It's not the entire retirement.
It's not the entire retirement, because at the end of the day, once you've it done, then you come home.
Okay.
So, look, I think each of us has to have a reason to wake up and get up every day.
Okay. So what are those? If I'm in my retirement, what could I do? Can I, you mentioned volunteering, you mentioned maybe getting involved with boards. How do you go about saying, going to boards of management? Can I be involved? Can I be a director? Or likewise, as you said, a volunteer? Okay. How do you go about that?
When you are still working, you probably still have a very active network.
Okay.
In your work, and we've talking 5 years out, and for the next 5 years you're probably top of your profession, because you're probably literally, because you're coming towards retirement, you probably within your organization, you're as high as you're ever going to go, right?
Yeah.
And therefore you still have all of the, and you're 5 years out, so it's not as if you're going in a few months. So you still have all of the relationship, all of the connectivity, all of the stuff. That is the time to start putting in place the infrastructure of what's the next plan, so that you're already doing that stuff, so that when you step back, you've used your connectivity. Because this concept, I think people often get an awful shock. They retire, and then after a while, they suddenly realize they've lost all this stuff, and they turn up at the workplace, you know, with the packet of buns or something. And it's very awkward because everybody's working and doing their thing, and everybody's in their own, you know, kind of space. And you're standing there like a fool, and people say, "Great to see you," and then they're gone. And then somebody, "Oh, how are you?" And then, "I'm sorry, I'm busy." And then you suddenly realize, I've no space here anymore. I've no place here, because when you go, you're gone. You know, so that 5 years is a crucial planning. You know, as we said, the most important thing is get the money right, because without that you're in big trouble. But once that's done, you really need to begin to think the route forward. And Standard Life have done a lot of research into this. And, you know, 67% of people, you know, haven't done this planning. And over 60% of people haven't even discussed it with their own family. You know, they've never discussed retirement. And that's a huge issue, because if you don't discuss it, you don't give your partner or your children or whatever the opportunity to feed back to you, one, how that is going to be for them, how together you might begin to reimagine how your life could be, and, you know, and then that might feed into your thinking, which in the remaining 5 years you can then, you know, kind of begin to put in place a plan. And there's also an empowerment in that, because if you've been the partner of the person who's coming to retirement, and they sit down with you 5 years out, or even earlier, or right through your relationship and your life, and say to you, "Listen, you know, I'll be changing my role in about 5 years because I'm planning to retire from whatever organization or company. And I know that, you know, this is going to be big changes for you. How do you think maybe we should look at this, deal with this?" Can you imagine as the partner how that feels? How the empowerment of that feels, rather than the person just arriving home and saying, "Well, now I've done my bit now, so I'm sitting here. What do you do?" You know, so So there's a whole relationship thing there about dialoguing with your family, with your partner, etc. And that itself might create some of the dynamic for the thinking, which in those 5 years you can begin to put in place.
And should you dialogue with your work colleagues, i.e., like, as you said, should you be dialoguing with the board of management, saying, you know, I'm retiring in the next few years, how can I stay involved in some capacity?
Absolutely. I mean, some people, you know, can stay involved in a voluntary capacity, or there may be other organizations, you know, where you use your management skills. I mean, I have found, I spent 6 years working for the state dealing with the education side of the redress board, for instance.
Of the where?
Redress board, people for institutions who were in institutions. And that basically meant using my skills in terms of management to put together schemes that would help people who effectively were never educated to literally begin to build educational small steps. And we, at the end of our 6 years, had people who literally had no educational qualifications, finishing off undergraduate degrees, going on to masters. You know, but I was doing that out of the skills I had developed in other aspects of my life, and the fulfillment that I got from watching those people blossom, who for their entire lives had literally never been able to actualize who they were, because they never got those first steps of basic education. So, I mean, those kind of opportunities to enable you to use your skills, and how good it feels to be able to give back. Because ultimately, in my life, I find that the greatest buzz is to be able to give rather than to get.
To take,
You know what I mean? And I think people coming to retirement have that massive potential to give, and yet to feel so empowered by that it generates better health, better outlook, quality of relationships, everything's buzzing.
So these are all kind of, you know, very work-orientated things. What about the pleasure side of things? You said earlier you were in Monkstown yesterday having a swim. Do you think that is like kind of really important for
absolutely
day to day?
You know, look, all of us, we are only as good as we allow ourselves to be in terms of, you know, the balance of our lives. Some people feel that, you know, working harder and harder and harder is somehow, you know, a plus. I have a brother-in-law who is in the corporate sector in the United States. He's now retired. And he was called in by his boss. I used to live out in California every summer for nearly 20 years there, because it was a nice place to spend the summer.
For sure.
And he was called in by his boss one day to say, I see you were in again yesterday, Sunday, working in the office, blah, blah, blah. I was just looking at the attendance there. And he was kind of putting chest out, yeah, I was here yesterday. And the boss said, not very happy with this. And he's kind of going. And she said, we really think you're a really, really top employee in this organization, and we want you to remain a top employee. But if you're spending all your waking hours in here, what's your family like?
Yeah.
Quality of life like? What is your energy level? What is your regeneration, your kind of new thinking, new ideas? Where's that coming from? If you're literally coming in here on Sundays and spending 4 or 5 hours here, you know, catching up and blah, blah, blah. And I think that was an awful shock to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he saw, as, you know, working yourself to the bone as being a sign of success and dedication. Whereas what the boss was saying was quite insightful to say, you're only as good as you are. And therefore, if your quality life, your family life, your relationship life, your fun needs, etc., if they are being met in a balanced way, then you're coming in here in the best quality that we're going to get the maximum potential out of you as an employee. Whereas if you're not, and you're literally completely wedded to the organization and only working, then effectively, you know, your quality and your regeneration as a human being is going to just go down the tubes, and ultimately at the end of the day, you know, really you're not being as productive as we could possibly.
So work smart, not hard.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's all coming through. Even now in Scotland, they've introduced they're trialing the 4-day working week.
Yes,
it's brilliant, you know. So like, bring it on for everybody.
It's not about saying, and I mean, you know, when you know, this whole thing about working from home. How many people in the office in an office environment are going around appearing to be busy, running from places, etc. But in fact, what they're doing is they're killing time. They're at work, and therefore they're getting paid. But ultimately, productivity is about what you're actually generating and creating. And I mean, I often find that, I mean, if I'm trying to work on an article for the Irish Times, you know, I have this kind of almost, you know, chewing the cud thing. You know, I have a concept going on in the back of my head for about 3 or 4 weeks. I'll have 3 or 4 of them going all the time. And I get to a point where, you know, I'll be developing it as I'm thinking, and just different things occurring to you. And then at a particular time, I normally do around 11:30 at night, I go, this one's already almost cooked. So I just sit down and boom, and it's there. It's one take, I do it in about 40 minutes. But it's because it's been kind of been brewing. And I think in organizations, you know, you need to have that capacity. You don't literally need to be showing, I'm working hard, guys. I really, you know, you could be sitting down and literally just looking at the ceiling, and in fact you're working very, very hard. And I think that COVID has given people the capacity to say, so long as I'm producing the goods at home, I don't feel guilty that if I'm playing with my kids, if in fact I'm feeling better at the end of it, and I again go and do an hour or something which is of such high quality because I've just had such a good time. So I think the concept of a 4-day week or working from home, what is effective is what matters, rather than simply say, I clock in at 9 every day, and we have this reality which we had until COVID, choked roads from 7 to 9, empty roads from 9 to 4, choked roads from 4 to 7, and we're all kind of on this Ferris wheel. Yeah, exactly.
Let's hope it doesn't come back. So I suppose a question, like, what people who didn't have any passions other than work, like, what do they do? You know, you're like, I've literally worked to the bones for the last 40 years. What, like, is it at 60, can you start the fun bucket, as you call it?
Yeah.
You know, what do you start doing to fill that, like, 5 years out?
Well, you say to yourself, as we're saying here in you know, in this discussion, Liz, you're saying that at the end of those 5 years, it is just going to disappear overnight, and it will be gone. And who are you? Who are you? It's a huge question. I think we all need to ask it to ourselves, because, you know, if you asked me that question 4 or 5 years ago, am I Brian Mooney, the guidance counsellor in Oaklands? Am I Brian Mooney, the Irish Times education columnist? Am I Brian Mooney, the husband? Am I Brian Mooney, the son to my mum? Who am I? And I think if you ask ourselves the question, and the only answer is, I'm the guy who goes in and is the MD or the head of department or whatever, and if that's your only answer, then you really need to ask the question at a deeper level. And I will put it to you like this. Imagine you're lying there on your deathbed and it's coming to an end and you're looking around you. Are you going to be saying, I'm really so appreciative that I put 40, 50 years into that job?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're going to be talking about, well, I'm so happy that I did this, or I raised those children, or I did something, or I became gradually through life at a level of awareness, etc. Ask yourself those questions. If now was the end, what are the things you would regret? And if you are in a work situation where you're just that person, what can you now do to make sure that when you get to that moment, 20, 30, hopefully 40 years down the road, that you will say, you know what, I'm happy.
Yeah, bucket list sorted.
And a bucket list, not I went on the trip to Australia.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to be saying those kind of things. If you are, you're a very shallow person.
Okay.
Most of us, I think, have a potential for depth, which if we begin to explore it, and think of the quality of the world.
Yes.
If people looked at life like that a bit more, and if we begin to reflect, what are the things that we can do now to give ourselves that level of contentment when effectively the lights start going out?
And to help the world and kind of give back, as you
Exactly.
said. Yeah. Especially now in the sustainability backdrop.
Absolutely.
And, the planet going on fire.
No,
basically.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. You know, I mean, when you look at Atlantic Philanthropy and what he did, at the end of the day, going around with a plastic watch, he wanted to give it all away because, in fact, what was he doing? He was getting the buzz from through his life while he was still there, giving back and giving back to the point where he ended up with nothing. And he was, that's it, I'm done now.
Delighted. What would you like to do if you? What's on your emotional bucket list?
Wow, that's a really good one, Liz. I mean, I probably to become a better husband, to become a deeper person, to begin to maybe take life a little bit slower because I am still very much on the Ferris wheel. I mean, I may be retired, but in fact, I'm working really hard. But look, I mean, I get calls in the last 24 hours from people who I maybe saw and gave a bit of help to over the last 12 months in terms of career, where people were so excited and just saying, thank you for that hour. And I mean, there's no way of, replicating that sense when some other human being comes back to you and says, that meant so much. And I've met people down the road, I've met past pupils who I taught 30, 40 years ago. And it's surprising, because I would have thought it would be about the content of what I taught them, you know what I mean? And one student said to me there, an adult at this stage said to me, you treated us with respect. Wasn't what I tried to teach them. You treated us with respect. Whereas other teachers might have not shown that respect for them as children. And I thought, wow, that's nice.
That's something nice to say.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what people will remember. Or that, that you weren't there in that domineering position. I'm the teacher, you do, you know what I mean? That in a sense, I probably had a way of working where I was dialoguing rather than, because I often think that in life, if you have an expertise, sometimes in communicating what you're trying to do, you're actually learning. I had about 5 or 6 trainee guidance counsellors in my last 10 years, some of them who actually targeted me to say, I want you to train me. And the first day they arrived in my office, and they're 30 years younger than me, some of them, I would have said to each one of them, look, you have a lot to learn from me, but I have a lot to learn from you because you're approaching life from a whole different perspective. I can only work with you if you establish a relationship of total trust for this year. I will give you everything that I think I know about this profession, but I want you to tell me where you see that I could do this better. Don't be in any way hesitant, just because I'm going to benefit from that. So my price to you for doing this is you give me feedback that enable me and tell me where my blind spots are, etc. I think that in life, we can continuously improve ourselves by constantly being open to the fact that we don't know it all and that we can always be a better person. And I think that if you're approaching retirement and you are that 5 years out, maybe it's a time to begin to say, okay, maybe I can become a better person. How many people in retirement take up a hobby after retirement, which then blossoms into a wonderful literary career. I was listening recently to a pianist who was playing a piano piece. It was on the news, and she had just released her something like 27th album. She learned the piano at 65. She did her first album at 80.
No way.
And she was 100 and something. And imagine what she would have done if she started. How many of us have hobbies that have been there lying dormant, like the seeds in the desert, that bit of rain which comes with the retirement, and you suddenly realize, I should have done this 30 years ago. This is who I really am. Many people actually may be in jobs where the job is something they got coming out of school. They never had the security to walk beyond it. They hung on to it and held on to it. They then retire. They have the freedom now, and they begin to explore that question about who am I? And then suddenly something amazing blossoms in it, and they go, wow. So maybe for you, 5 years out from retirement, the person possibly listening to us today, maybe inside you is the seed of somebody completely different that has yet to live, that might, if you give it that opportunity to grow, might actually become the essence of who, when you actually come to the end of your life. Well, actually, I never really figured out who I was until I retired, but I had 30 or 25 wonderful years of becoming the person I potentially should have maybe started in my 20s.
So you can still be a rock star at 60, is that what you're saying?
You can indeed.
Okay, so just to summarise, what we've been talking about, basically you're saying 5 years out, the most important thing to start doing is kind of, literally strategizing. How am I going to fill the needs that, keep me going every day?
Are the things I'm doing today that keep me going? How am I going to replicate those? And possibly, as we've just said, maybe look at what the freedom that retirement would give you to maybe do the things. And we're not talking about the world trip, etc. But there are the things within you that are always kind of maybe gnawing away at you, that wish you'd done, or things that you thought you had a skill and a talent at that you've never really had the opportunity. Maybe now's the time. Now's the time to
tap into that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously get your finances in order. Go talk to your financial planner.
Oh no, absolutely. That's the basis, because without that,
nothing else can happen.
Nothing else can happen. I mean, or otherwise you have to continue working to actually put food on the table, and that then denies you the opportunity. But taking as read, and to people who are helping people do this, who are financial advisory people, you don't have to be an expert like me in the sense of being a therapist or anything like that to actually do this. So if you've got a client sitting down with you doing the financial bit, do your financial bit. But a simple question like,
what makes you tick?
What makes you tick? Or actually, Standard Life have a Second Life questionnaire, which is just all those triggers, asking those questions. So maybe, look at the Standard Life questionnaire and just go through the various questions, which you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to come up with the answers. All you need to do is you need to generate the questions so that the other person can go, maybe I need to think about that. So don't be fearful if you're in the financial planning side to think that somehow you need huge expertise to ask somebody the question, what are you planning to do with your life when you finish? Where's the car's in the driveway? I've made sure that it's full of petrol. Now, where are you planning to go? Or even another concept. You know the seed trays that we sometimes plant when we plant the seeds, and they're all there and they're all clustered together and they're all comfortable, right? But then we take them out and we put them in the garden, and for a period of time they're vulnerable because obviously they've been replanted. But now that they've been replanted, they can grow in the space that you've now given them. For a lot of people, the work environment, that 40 years might be the seed tray. And the replanting, supported, nurtured, helped along, might give you the potential to grow and blossom in a way that you've never been able to do so within the working environment. And take that concept and bring it forward and see where you can go for it over the next 5 years.
It's a very nice analogy. Okay, so if people would like more information, they can go onto the Standard Life website and they can fill out the Second Life questionnaire. And thank you, obviously, Brian, for coming here today to discuss your many hypotheses on retirement and life in general. And also, the Pension Awareness Week team are available at hello@pensionawarenessweek.ie, and you can contact them or any of the gentlemen in Money Cubed. and they can help you get all your boxes in order.
Absolutely.
So you can have a great retirement. We can all blossom forevermore.
Well, it's been a wonderful opportunity to talk to you, Liz.
You too.
And thank you for all the stimulating questions.
Thank you.